a privilege and an honor of mine to introduce to you our keynote for the summit. You know, this is a very coveted thing that I get to do, and I was asked to do it, and I was very, very honored. Because our keynote is larger than life, not just because he's tall. He is a record breaker. I'll explain why. But most importantly, he is the embodiment of the American dream. Long before he was our great US Senator, he was a son of 2 immigrants from Mexico. A father who was a short order cook and took pride in the fact that when the kitchen was inspected, it always passed. His mother, who supported her family by cleaning other people's homes. And in the San Fernando Valley, in a community called Pacoima, for those of us who know where that is, that's where his story began. And he went all the way to MIT. Yeah, that MIT, the really smart people MIT. And he studied mechanical engineering. Yes, I see all the mechanical engineers, they're just so excited right now. They're just beaming with pride. But you know, instead of following that course of work, he decided to do something else. He decided to get into politics as he witnessed the injustice. And from there on, there was no limit. He was elected to the Los Angeles City Council at the age of 26. I know, I feel like such an underachiever right now. And just 2 years after that, he was the council president of the Los Angeles City Council. Then during the 9/11 and its aftermath, he was the mayor of the city of Los Angeles. From there, he went on to be a California state senator in 2006. And then went on to Secretary of the State, the first Latino to hold that position in 2014. Yes. Look, I told you he was a record breaker. It doesn't end there. He was also the first US Senator when he was appointed in 2021 to fill the Vice President Harris's position, and then was elected in 2022. And he has been busy working and championing. He's the first Latino to be the chairman of the State Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety. He's a chair of the Senate for Environment and Public Works, and he also serves on the Senate Committee on Budget, Energy and Natural Resources, Rules and Administration, where he has done outstanding work for us, such as a low-income household water assistance program, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. He's a tireless champion of infrastructure, environment, but most of all, of people. So it is with great honor, please help me welcome our great US Senator, Alex Padilla.
Good afternoon, everybody. Try that one more time. Good afternoon, everybody. All right. It's my oldest son. This is his last day of school. He just finished finals. So I get the low energy, the last day of school for young people. But for you all, come on. I want to thank Jen for that very, very generous and kind introduction, and warn her now that I'm going to invite her to all my events to be the one to introduce me. It's great to be here. It's capping off quite the week for me, a week of not having to be in Washington, a week of no committee hearings, no votes in the floor of the Senate. It means I got to be home here in California for the week, and we've been busy. But I'm ending the week here in Orange County, talking about water with folks not just from Orange County. I know this is a convening of water industry leaders from Orange County, Los Angeles County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, San Diego County. Did I miss anybody? Riverside County, did I say Riverside? Sorry, San Bernardino, Riverside, San Diego, Orange, LA. Next year, let's invite Ventura too. Let's keep this thing growing, right? Let me tell you why I think it's so special. There's a lot to talk about in the water field right now, but just, and you guys, I think, know this, but know how much I appreciate the footprint represented by all of you today is more than 20 million Californians. Half our state's population, right? The state with the largest economy of any state in the nation, the fifth largest economy in the world, half of that depends on you all for water. That's a big deal, a big responsibility. And we'll talk about the impact of changing climate and aging infrastructure and all that stuff. So delivering that clean, reliable, and affordable water is not easy, but it's so critical, and we have all of you to thank. Half the state's population, 1 in 5 Americans count on you. And so it's an honor to be afforded this opportunity to address you, have this audience with you. And it's thanks to June and thanks to my good friend Peter Villegas, who let me off the hook last year when I couldn't be here in person and sent a video. He didn't give me the choice. No, you got to be here, bro. You got to be here in person this year because we're doing too much in water to not be here to share with all of you in person. I mentioned it's been a great week, a great year, not just because of the levels of investment in water infrastructure made possible by the bipartisan infrastructure law from a couple of years ago, the single largest federal investment in water infrastructure in history. So thank your Congressman Lou Correa, who has been a good friend for many, many years. All the story he says about me is true, but he only says the good ones, so I'll acknowledge those. Tremendous champion. We fly together to and from Washington every week, and I always see him on the plane. He's always working hard on your behalf. So thank you, Lou, for your partnership, for your vote on the bipartisan infrastructure law. I voted for it on the Senate side, as you know, and President Biden signed it into law. It's making a whole lot of projects across the country possible. Tens of billions of dollars, literally, in hundreds of projects throughout the country. But more specifically and more recently, I was with a lot of the Metropolitan Water District leaders and members a couple of days ago, celebrating $150 million of federal funds for water recycling projects here in the region. I celebrated because I know there's a number of others, but the Pure Water Project alone would be the largest in the country, one of the largest in the world, and does represent sort of a new era of water, meeting our water needs in the country. Lou Correa was talking about some of the history on water recycling, and that I hadn't heard that phrase in a long time. Lou, toilet to tap? See, as you heard in the introduction, my first political office was a member of the Los Angeles City Council. I grew up and represented the San Fernando Valley. There was this paper, the Daily News, that really, really gave it to the city of LA and LA Department of Water and Power for having the audacity to consider it years and years ago. And it was actually the progress made in Orange County that helped turn the PR tide to help embrace these types of investments as part of our portfolio of solutions going forward. Anyway, the investments that we're celebrating this week are going to help us deal with the multiple challenges, right? How do we keep serving a growing population and a growing economy with aging infrastructure and, frankly, dwindling water supplies? We know that climate change is real. We're coming off of some momentum, though, I think. I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the Colorado River and what we've done to get through some short-term challenges as we prepare for long-term challenges. But I get to embrace all this not just as your senator, but as chair of the Environment and Public Works Subcommittee on Water. So we have at least that gavel to work from and demonstrate that if we can get our act together here in Southern California, this really does become the model for the rest of the state, the rest of the Western United States, and the rest of the country. Now, again, I know that the challenges are significant, not just because of the need to invest more in our infrastructure, but our changing climate and all the manifestations of climate change, whether it's wildfires, the need for water, impact on infrastructure, floods and atmospheric rivers, and its unique impact on infrastructure, sustained drought, and now emerging sources of contamination. So the bipartisan infrastructure law, as significant of an investment as it is, I pray and I hope that it is not the last word on investment in water infrastructure. I think we need to treat it as just a down payment with more investment to follow. I'll take that. So Peter asked me to talk about what I think are some of the most pressing water issues, right? These are the leaders in the room, and I have the gavel in Congress on the Senate side. And so what are some of the areas that we're focusing on besides investing the infrastructure dollars wisely and responsibly? A big one that I'm very, very proud of is a simple concept, water affordability. There's a lot that goes into ensuring that our water sources are reliable, that it's clean and safe to drink and to bathe in. We also got to make sure that it's affordable. In a country as wealthy as the United States, it is unconscionable that some people, some families today have to choose between paying the rent or paying the water bill, or keeping the pantry stocked or paying the water bill. Water rates have been rising 3 times faster than inflation. Water rates in general have risen more quickly than our energy bills and our medical bills. So it's a real issue for a lot of working families. Meanwhile, we know that the federal government has invested less and less in water infrastructure for the past several decades now. So the cost of maintaining that water supply, the quality of the water supply keeps going up. Federal share of investment is going down. Those are 2 bad trends for all of us. And so the concept I've proposed is pretty simple, just as we do for energy bills, right? As a nation, we've determined that even if you're poor, you shouldn't have to freeze in the winter. Just because you're poor shouldn't mean that you have to go without clean water to cook, to bathe. And so I have a bill, the LIWOP Establishment Act, that would take the pilot project that was approved during the COVID-19 pandemic and make it a permanent program, a permanent assistance program for low-income households to afford their water bills. Now, I know that's not another grant for you all or another funding stream for utilities and agencies, but we know that, look, your ability to meet the investment needs that you have, it's got to come from somewhere. And you can only raise rates so much responsibly. So if we can alleviate some of the pain for so many of the families, so many of your customers, then maybe there is a little bit of a softening of the blow as we need to invest more and more in the years ahead. And I'm proud to report that the president did include this in his proposed budget. So we're off at a good point when it comes to negotiating the spending bills next go around. But the way the administration did it, it combined a single pot of funding for this water assistance program and the energy program. And so now it's incumbent upon us in Congress to make sure that we're not having these 2 programs compete for each other. The energy program needs its funding levels, and the water program needs its funding levels, so we don't have to choose between. A second big area of emphasis and focus is Colorado River. I mentioned it a minute ago. And I do want to commend everybody in this room that embraced the spirit of collaboration in coming up with the solutions that were necessary to get through, or not out of, the drought scenarios. But before these last couple of wet winters, we were in pretty dire straits. Reservoir levels were way low, dam levels were way low, the Colorado River was dwindling, and it wasn't just pockets of Southern California that were hurting. All the basin states, upper basin and lower basin states, were in a pinch. We couldn't even see our way to the end of the current agreements in 2026. And what has historically been, yes, Congressman Correa, whiskeys for drinking, waters for fighting over, we have learned in California is not the way to go, right? California 20 years ago made some tough decisions between environmental use, agricultural use, and urban use, and some tough choices to balance the needs and meet the needs of our growing population and economy, decisions that other states are just now beginning to confront. And I remember vividly, it was about a year ago, that there was a headline that 6 of the 7 Colorado River states have come together on a consensus solution. And I got a chance to talk to my colleagues in the Senate and say, you know what? 6 states versus California is not a consensus. Half the people who depend on the Colorado are my constituents, not yours. We got to do better. And we did. It was tough. We powered through. You all rolled up your sleeves along with your negotiating representatives, and we came up with some thoughtful ways to get through those drought conditions. And thankfully, we had a couple wet winters to help soften the blow. Getting through the end of 2026 was the easy part. Now comes, what does the Colorado River sharing agreement look like starting in 2027? Those tough decisions to get us through 2026 were the easy ones to start the 2027 negotiations with. And already there seems to be a little bit of a difference in the tone of how California and Arizona and Nevada and other states are talking to each other. At least among the lower basin states, everybody knows that each state has to do its fair share in conserving and saving water. We need to make sure that the upper basin states adopt that spirit, and I have full confidence that we will. But just know that the shared sacrifice isn't always the best term, but everybody kind of doing their part is the way to go. That spirit of collaboration that California has done in the past is what we're bringing to these Colorado River negotiations. It's the only way through, and you guys have been the model for that. So we thank you tremendously. Another key top-of-mind subject, another one that Congressman Correa, who took half my speech, already touched on, PFAS, right? Commonly referred to as a forever chemical. We know that its presence is frankly harmful. We need to get it out of our water supply, and that cleanup is going to cost. So back to the need for more federal investment in meeting this. I would hear it from every single one of you when you do your annual lobbying trips to Washington, D.C. There's literally hundreds of meetings that I and my staff take with different representatives, and we hear it over and over again. We need help if we're going to clean up. And number two, we can't take on that liability, right? How do we keep the focus on liability on the actual polluters and not you all that get water, you treat water, trying to deliver water, but you're not the ones that put the PFAS in the water, right? So just know that I hear you, I agree, and I'm working with my colleagues on the committee to figure out a way to maintain that, to make sure that you're not directly hit with the liability or brought in by the actual polluters through third-party litigation to share in that liability and responsibility from a fiscal standpoint. Very well aware of that. And I think lastly for now, because I want to be respectful of your all time, raise your hand if you're from San Diego here. Okay. Tijuana River, right? San Diego, sewage crisis. I've been down there to see for myself with my own eyes. Actually, it was Assemblymember Denise Ducheney once upon a time that first started talking to me about the Tijuana River issues. When toxic waste and sewage comes from south of the border to the northern part of the border, it's not just kind of messing up some beautiful beaches down there. It's a public health concern. So significant, as I've shared with my colleagues, that when we have Border Patrol agents getting sick on the job because of exposure, when you have Navy SEALs training in the waters and getting sick because of their exposure, we have a problem. It's a public health problem, an environmental problem, a national security problem. And so with those arguments, we've been able to secure yet another $100 million to go towards remediation upgrades going forward of those facilities down there, and we're working on additional funding as well. We're also pushing not just the EPA to do its job sooner rather than later, but calling in expertise and experience from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to be partners in ensuring that the improvements to those facilities are made sooner rather than later. So I can go on with some specifics. I will just wrap up with this. In honor of my late former colleague and former boss, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who really embraced the challenges of water policy and water infrastructure in both Northern and Southern California, I'm trying to live up to that standard. As not just a relatively new senator, but now the senior senator for California, I know how vital water is for each community in the state. and beyond. They know how challenging it has been. I've seen it at the city level, I've seen it at the state level, and now I see it at the federal level. And I'm committed to continuing to work with all of you to meet the needs of the communities that we serve collectively. And again, from Colorado River to climate change to aging infrastructure to contaminants, we have our work cut out for us, but I know that we have the ingenuity and the commitment and the leadership in this room to meet the challenge of our time. So thank you all for having me. Thank you all for the work that you do. Thank you, Peter, again for the invitation.
Well, thank you so much for that speech, and thank you for coming to our summit. It means so much to have you here. We are such tremendous fans of your leadership. You know, I've heard many of your speeches, and you said, behind every policies and issues, there's the humanity. So can we get to know you a little bit? So you weren't going to be in politics when you went to MIT. What was the mindset? What was your journey as to the why you decided to change courses and get into politics?
So I actually have two answers to this question. The first one is, to me, I think it's a pretty logical career trajectory. You get your engineering degree, and then you go into politics. Why? Give me a second. Engineers are trained to solve problems. Isn't that what elected officials are supposed to be doing, right? Well, I can tell you from experience now, the equations and theories are very different. But at least I bring that spirit with me. The true life answer to all that is this. So I was fresh home from college in 1994. On the November ballot that year was a measure infamously now referred to as Proposition 187. Again, not just fresh home from college, you heard in the introduction, I'm a proud son of immigrants, but both my mom and my dad worked hard so that my sister, my brother, and I can get a good education. That was all they wanted. That was their American dream. Get their kids to college and through college. And that's the key to a better life. And so I'm back with a degree, like ink still wet on the paper from one of the finest universities in the country. And then I see the then governor of California on television basically saying our state's going downhill and it's the fault of people like your parents and communities like yours. That was Proposition 187, as I heard it, as I interpreted it. And so I realized, well, the engineering degree looks nice on the wall, and maybe I'll come back to that at some point. But right now, I got to get into the political game, because that will be part of impacting for the better the trajectory of our state. And so starting to organize before I knew what organizing was, registering voters, being part of political campaigns before I actually ran for office. I had the audacity to run for city council for the second largest city in America at the ripe old age of 25. But my community took a chance on me. And it's been a hell of a ride ever since.
Yeah, that deserves a clap. Imagine what would have happened if they never took a chance on you. Wow.
I knew going in that win or lose, I ain't going anywhere. Right? I intentionally came back from MIT back to my home community to try to make a difference. So if I was elected, I'd do the best job I could. If I didn't get elected, Don remembers me from those days, I would have figured out some other position with which to effectuate change. Maybe nonprofit advocacy, maybe starting a business, maybe teaching, I don't know, but life has been good.
Well, and I get to work with a lot of engineers, all different kinds. They make pretty good money. So what was your parents' reaction when you told them your decision? Because, let's be honest, when you look at the income, it's a little different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was something along the lines of, you're going to do what? They're going to pay you how much? What? Especially the campaign work that I did once upon a time. But, I blame my mom. I know she still looks down on us from up above, because she was the community organizer, right? When it came to any issues in the community, whether it's lack of after-school programs, crime in the community, people just down on their luck and needing another meal, my mom was always the first one to reach out, to lend a hand. My brother and sister and I, we all get that sort of service spirit from that upbringing. So elected office, it's about helping people. That's what it should be anyway. And so I guess they weren't completely shocked. Helped that I lived at home for a while too, just to go easy on the bills.
I can only imagine how proud they are. Now, you mentioned you are now the senior senator. And for those who may not be really familiar with what that means, do you have more power? What does it mean to be a senior senator? But also, what does it mean for you personally?
It's been a whirlwind last couple of years. And thankfully, because of my years of service, there's some new faces for me in the audience, but there's a lot of faces that I've seen and have folks that I've gotten to know over the years in different capacity. So I think you share the journey with me. At least that's how I feel. So in the year 2020, it was my 6th year as Secretary of State, getting ready for a big year, right? It was a presidential election just 4 years ago, a very consequential presidential election, and I'm in charge of elections in California at the time. The governor called me one day and he says, your office does such a great job. I need you to chair the California Census Complete Count Committee, right? Because so much rides on the census, right? The population count determines federal funding formulas. We've got to make sure that typically underserved, undercounted communities, we get a better count. And so I said, does that come with more staff? No. Does it come with a bigger budget? No. Then I'll do it. Because I knew how important it was. And so now I have like 2 big jobs going into 2020, and then COVID hits. So we get through that, and it's like capping off a decade of putting the family through a lot of stuff. And it ends with President Biden and then Senator Harris winning the election. And in January, we know they're going to be sworn in as president, vice president, and there's going to be a vacancy in the U.S. Senate. And the governor calls. I'm hoping you guys have all seen what I call the Zoom scene around the world when he asked if I'd filled that vacancy. Huge honor, humbling experience and opportunity. Never in my wildest dreams growing up did I think I'd be in politics at all, let alone serving in the United States Senate. But there I go, transitioning in COVID pre-vaccines and 2 weeks after January 6th. Right? Think about the times we were living in. Tremendous responsibility, tremendous opportunity, but it's only for a year and a half. If you want to keep the job, you got to run on next year's ballot. In the most populous state in the nation, the most expensive state to run in the nation, while I'm flying back and forth across country every week, it was tough. I get elected to my first full term, and literally a few months later, we lose Senator Feinstein and become the senior senator. So from the early transition to the re-election to now the senior senator status, it's been a lot. But I consider it blessings, all these opportunities to just try to do good, try to help people. And the city council days, it was filling potholes and doing those sorts of things. And now it's tackling literally the biggest issues for our country and the planet. The senior senator status does not come with a bigger budget or a bigger staff, maybe a few more square feet because there's a slightly larger office. But I've talked to my colleagues that are senior senators, like, so what does it mean? What does it really mean? And they say, it just depends on your relationship with the other senator, right? Sometimes there's a deference, sometimes there's a respect, sometimes there's a good working relationship. In a lot of states, there's not. And so when Senator Butler was appointed to fill the vacancy after Senator Feinstein's passing, Senator Butler is somebody that I've known for many years, have worked in a different capacity, so we've been working well together. She did not seek re-election. It's either going to be Adam Schiff or Steve Garvey. I'm willing to wager a bet if anybody's interested. I'm a big Dodger fan, but I'm voting. It's going to be a great working relationship going forward. The senior senator status, again, I think it's more in the relationship, kind of the deference. California deserves 2 senators to truly be a tag team, right, to maximize our leadership and our impact for the state by doing so, including in the recruitment, nomination, and confirmation of federal judges, by the way. That's one of the things that's often overlooked. We talk about issues, appropriations, but federal judges in California is a big, big deal. So look forward to working with whoever wins in November on those important things.
Well, and you said it's a big opportunity to have you as our senior senator. So we all need to take advantage of that. And how do we do that? Because you even mentioned with energy and water, we don't want it to compete. I'd imagine you work with legislators who also have their interests and agendas, and you have to balance all of that. And you've done a great job for us. And this is kind of the old question, like, help me help you. What can we do as an industry to better support you in championing for our cause? Because I can only imagine the amount of door knocks and the people that come up to you just within the day. How can we be better supporters of you?
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of how you can help me advocate for us, but let me be blunt also. We're celebrating a lot of these investments, a lot of the funding that's been coming by way of the infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and just annual appropriations bills. So how do we keep the funds flowing? It's by sharing success stories, right? The rounds of funding, when we can say we implemented it responsibly and successfully, like what's the outcome of that? Additional water supply or cleaner water. We kept the project on time and on budget, or ahead of budget. When I go back to fight for more, it's a lot easier to say bring more to California when we're using those funds well versus I know these projects are late, I know they're over budget, but I need more money. That's just a harder sell with our colleagues from other parts of the country and obviously from the other side of the aisle too. So success stories, I know you have them, just keep bringing them to us. And also the innovations, right? It's, once upon a time, water recycling was just a dream. And then it became reality, but it was small scale. Now we're talking large scale. So when Adele delivers, and we can brag about it across the country, and know that this isn't just for California, the whole Western United States is going to benefit from this. That's what gives us that momentum and that clout in the Senate.
Well, and this week you were at Pure Water at Carson's, Pure Water SoCal. Great funding for our Southern California. And you said earlier about what Congressman Correa said, which is there's got to be trust. And we have 5 counties here today, 5 of the 6 counties served by Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Next year we'll have the 6th Ventura on board. And we always agree on everything. All 6 counties, we just get along really well. Just been really easy. Not to be funny, but we compete amongst ourselves. So when you talk about delivering projects on time, on budget, and sharing success stories, when we compete, we're not giving you what you need is kind of what I'm hearing. And from where you sit, when you see all these agencies advocate, especially you mentioned Colorado River, because that's 7 states advocating. What advice do you have for our industry? What might we do better or differently so that we can continue to be success stories for you to champion further for us?
A little competition is good as long as it's placed properly, right? We're not fighting over acre feet of water. I think the competition is in who's got the best ideas, right? Because whether it's on a global scale, like the 7 Colorado River Basin states, upper and lower together, like our futures are truly interconnected because our water infrastructure and our supply is truly interconnected. So it can never be a California pulls it over on Arizona or Arizona, Nevada pull it over on Colorado and Wyoming or whoever else. We're interconnected. And unless the solutions are win-win, we're all going to lose. That's the reality that climate change has put us in. And we can bring that back locally, and I think that same spirit is increasingly the case even within the very boring, uneventful, non-controversial Metropolitan Water District meetings. Right, we have our respective constituencies that you all represent, but ultimately knowing that our population, our economy, and our natural resources and our infrastructure is truly interconnected, the solutions going forward have to be those win-win solutions.
And I know we have to let you go. Last question for you to close out for us. going back to how we started this conversation about humanity, and you just talked about how everything is interconnected. So are we as people, regardless of what community, what background, socioeconomic class. And when you balance safe, clean, reliable drinking water for all, it's very aspirational, and we need to strive for that. But it's also very hard to balance the cost of maintaining and building infrastructure, and who's going to pay for that, and who will have the first access to that. So as we all grapple with that in the coming years, and presently as well, what parting thoughts do you have for us?
Well, I've already talked about sort of bringing the success stories, because I know there's a lot of them, and the human stories, not just a project delivery, but whether there's economic growth made possible, more housing development made possible because of a water supply that was stabilized, right? We know there's a housing shortage in California and in the country, or just families. I mean, think of, you don't have to go to the Central Valley, but there's some of the most poignant stories of whole communities that don't have reliable water flowing through their taps. And the impact that it takes, the toll that it takes on family, on health, quality of life, the economy, et cetera. So we have both the good stories and the bad stories, but humanizing the impact to convince the federal government that it needs to do its part in funding the investments and being part of the solution. It used to be a much bigger partner decades ago. We've gotten away from that. We need to go back to that.
Well, thank you again so much for your time and for all your leadership. Let's give our U.S. Senator a final round of applause.